Another thing about the absence of legal distinctions, there is something else that goes on there, which is to have God also specialize in punishing the innocent. That's what they do. They portray God as, that's his specialty, punishing the innocent and letting the guilty, even the willfully guilty, you see, treating them, oddly enough, as though they were innocent, which is interesting. And it's funny how you have the doctrine of positional truth. That's where God treats the willfully guilty as though they were innocent. And they can go around and sin all they want, and God treats them as though they were innocent. So they have God treating the innocent as though they were guilty, and treating the guilty as though they were innocent. And that's why they have the atonement the way it is, and the sacrifice the way it is, completely without any legal distinctions, where the innocent is punished for things that are not even crimes. The innocent is punished even for somebody being born. The innocent is punished for man being enslaved. And the innocent is punished with the disposition, you see, of wrath, that the man should have been able to do something about it. That's the complete lack of legal distinctions whatsoever, and it's to portray God as being as evil as possible. And as evil as possible is the state of Satan. And so that's why they have the atonement covering everything. And I understand what the scriptures say when it says the atonement covered sins of ignorance and inability, but not willful sins. The atonement never covered rape, bank robbery, and murder. You see, that's what the evil guy does. He invents that to try and make his own conscience feel better, to think that he's going to get away with his evil and he'll never suffer wrath, you see, because the innocent did instead of him. And he wants it to be that way. They want it to be that way. You see, they can't claim that they don't want their Christ punished for every single sin they could ever have. And they're not satisfied with that. It's not a sin or a crime to be born or to be placed in the body of flesh. Because guess who does that? Their God. And I would say, well, you see, my God does too. But my God doesn't hold it against them. They want their God punishing the innocent every time it's possible, to where if they were any more absurd, their whole deception would blow apart. And even the naive would say, your God ain't no good. And so they take it as far as they go, as far as they can. God, he holds it against the infant for some guy eating of a tree some 10,000 years ago. The infant's responsible when he isn't. Now, clearly the infant is innocent. The infant, he was born sinful. Guess what? He's innocent of that. He had nothing to do with it. Guess who had everything to do with it? It was God. And so therefore God is portrayed as that being one of his trademarks, which is punishing the innocent. It would be like God going to those who were born slaves in Egypt and holding the fact that they were born slaves and they cannot free themselves against them. And so therefore he has wrath on the slaves in Egypt, as though they could have done something. And so here you have this wrath for which there is no legal basis whatsoever, you see, because the absence of legal distinctions. God looks at them as though they should have done it. It is specializing and portraying God as punishing the innocent and holding things against man which ought not be held against man. And for the purposes of God being severe with man. This is the most severe penalty for every single thing that there ever is. Even for things that aren't even sins, severe penalty. This has to do with the basis from which God builds up all this wrath. You see, because God says the infant deserves death for just being born. It's his fault. He's innocent. It's the truth of the matter. For that which I want to do, I do not do. And the very thing I don't want to do, I wind up doing. I'm innocent. It's not me, Paul said. It's not I. But God says, yes it is. And so you see, the one who, for the very thing I want to do, I do not do, and the very thing I don't want to do, I wind up doing, he's innocent of any willful crimes. But you see, therefore, because he is innocent, the religious people want to portray God as treating him as though he were willfully guilty. And man, where there are things beyond his control, God treats man as though they were under the man's control. And in that, God punishes the innocent, or calls for the punishment. But you know what he does at the last minute? He goes, oh, they're guilty of all this stuff, and as though they could have done something about it. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Instead of punishing the guilty who are not guilty, I'm going to divert all this wrath unto my innocent son and punish him as though he were guilty. So You have God holding things against man which he is innocent of, and treating him as though he were guilty, or having the disposition toward the man as though he were guilty when he was not. And then he diverts all this onto his son who's innocent, and treats him who is innocent, who is not guilty, and treats him as though he were. They specialize in that, to make God appear as evil as possible. That's why I ask them, in the Mosaic Law, anywhere in the Bible, where you have a willful crime, adultery, rape, murder, show me the instructions for offering up a sacrifice for that. It's missing, isn't it? And people like to play games. You know, someone might say, well, can I name one human who has not committed one sin against God? In one way or another? Now, you know what's funny? Why say one way or another, you know? One way or another? Now, what? You want legal distinctions? How's about, for that which I do not want to do, how's about a man in a state of ignorance? A man who's deceived. He thinks it's the truth and it isn't. And so therefore, he sins against God unknowingly. Well, guess what? He don't deserve wrath for it. What he deserves is the correct information so that he would no longer sin against God. Even where there is wrongdoing, does all wrongdoing deserve wrath? You see, that's another question. What the religious person's doing is the man who commits any sin and it doesn't deserve wrath. According to them, there is no such thing as a sin that does not deserve wrath. See, if I were to ask somebody, a religious person, name a sin that does not call for wrath, that's where you have that long, awkward silence where they're stymied. They don't know what to say, but they certainly don't want to repent and acknowledge the truth of the matter. You know what I mean. They don't want to do that because they'd have to accept that which is good in order to do it. And they take offense. Lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. No, I'm not afraid of lions and tigers and bears. I'm afraid of God being portrayed as lawful. I don't even want to start with the first basic premise that it's not a crime to be created by God and placed in a body by Him to which God can hold wrath against you for it as though you did it. Heavens forbid, then we'd have to continue on using those principles and go all the way to the uncovering of the evil of the religious people.